let's look into the crystal ball for 2019. And let's start with this one. And we're going to know the answer to this first one here within the next 24 hours or so. I believe that EC3 will debut on Monday Night Raw, and he will do so tomorrow night. And he will debut on Raw to interrupt John Cena, who is scheduled to be on the show tomorrow night. Not unlike the way that Chris Jericho debuted to interrupt The Rock on Raw all those many years ago, although I would not compare EC3 to Jericho or The Rock, but just in terms of how the debut might go down, look, what better way to make a splash in your first appearance than by going for the biggest name in the room, right? So I could think of worse ways to make your debut on TV. Chris Jericho, I predict, will challenge Hiroshi Tanahashi for the IWGP Championship at Madison Square Garden, WrestleMania weekend, on the Ring of Honor New Japan G1 Supercard, and he will lose. And this one really, I think, is just going to come down to whether or not Jericho is sticking to his guns that, he doesn't want to betray Vince McMahon by wrestling on American soil for a different company, which he has held true to so far. This is going to test that loyalty. And if he has had a change of heart and doesn't mind doing so, I can't think of a bigger match for him than, headlining for the title against Tanahashi. I predict that Switchblade Jay White will become the IWGP Heavyweight Champion before this year is over. Clearly, he is being groomed for that spot. I think the only question is, does it happen this year? Does it happen next year? I think it will happen this year. Kenny Omega. Kenny Omega has been a name that has been in the news a lot lately. I predict that Kenny Omega, for all this talk about him going to WWE, will strike a deal to wrestle for both All Elite Wrestling and New Japan Pro Wrestling. Now, I can believe that WWE very much wants to sign this guy, and, these reports I'm reading, though, about how they've offered him a $3 million or $3.5 million contract or some ridiculous figure like that. I don't know what orifice people are pulling this out of. That just sounds completely ridiculous to me. Not that they don't have the money if they wanted to throw it at him. Believe me, they've got that Fox money. They've got that sweet Saudi money. If they wanted somebody bad enough, they could certainly do that. But to throw what probably is more like Brock Lesnar money at Kenny Omega, I don't see it. I don't see that. But it's also, it reminds me of, remember those reports, was it last year, I think it was, or the year before, that WWE offered Dolph Ziggler a contract extension or a new contract for $1.5 million to stay. Give me a break. Even Dolph later on said, that's ridiculous. But look, I'm sure that they would love to have their hands on him, and they would probably give him a great deal. I think in the end, he sticks with his buddies. And look, he is not going to make this decision based on who his friends are. The deciding factor in this is not going to be, oh boy, I sure don't want to leave my friends behind. I think that's probably part of his thinking, but the decision he's going to ultimately make is based on what's in it for him. And how sweet is the offer? What kind of freedom does he have? Does he think he'll enjoy and have fun working there? The whole friend angle is, I think, way overplayed. It can't hurt to have friends. But look, he's got friends in WWE too. It's not like All Elite is the only place this guy has friends. I think that in the end, he wants to probably have the freedom to do what he wants. And he'll be able to have that freedom a lot more if he splits his time between those two companies as opposed to going to WWE. And look, I think he's got a good thing going. And a year from now, barring injury, he'll still be valuable to WWE. Yeah, he'll be a year older. He'll be 36 or 37 or however old he'll be. AJ Styles was older than that when he came over to WWE. And he was one of the few guys who came over and really got pushed, I think, at the level that he should have been pushed. That doesn't happen for everybody. AJ Styles is a great success story. You could say Nakamura to a lesser extent. He did come in and win the Rumble and, get a championship match at WrestleMania and all that. Other guys don't fare as well. I do think Omega would probably do well if he were to go over there. You can't discount the whole Roman Reigns thing. Roman Reigns, everything was built around him, and WWE lost their big star for the foreseeable future. They lost him, very unexpectedly, very suddenly. And that opened up a void. Now, whether or not Omega were to come in and share that with other people or just be the guy, I don't know that he would be the guy, but, I've said this before, if ever there was a time for him to make the jump, it is now. because they need people. They need that. I mean, he could come in as a heel, I guess, but they really need another big babyface to kind of plug in, I think, to that main event scene right now in WWE. So, he's in pole position right now. But look, it was only last year that Omega did a live stream on Twitch. And he talked about how much it meant to him to feel like wherever he goes that he's making a difference. And that he does not want to be a robot. That was his word. I don't want to be a robot. I don't want to be controlled. Telling good stories, he said, is the thing that was most important to him. Well, you know what? If that's the case, unless he has done a complete 180 and the power of the dollar bill trumps all, then the best place for him, if they can reach some sort of an understanding, because remember, that means the two companies would have to be willing to work together. This is bigger than just Kenny Omega. But I think in the end, that's the deal that gets made. And I think Omega basically stays where he is and splits his time between the two companies. Here's a bit of a bold prediction. CM Punk will wrestle a match for All Elite Wrestling. His first match in over 5 years. When Punk was asked about the All In show last year, there was a bit of a back and forth with him and Cody, and that Cody, I think, was the one who claimed that there was an offer made or they wanted him there. And Punk said, look, nobody ever made me a formal offer. Had they done so, I would have been happy to listen to it. He didn't reject it outright. That tells me that for the right amount of money, for the right deal, and for one match at least, CM Punk would be more than happy to step back into the wrestling ring. Even better if it's not for somebody with the last name McMahon. And if AEW ends up having as much money behind it as it sounds like they do, they can afford to make Punk a very big offer for at least one match, and I think he'll take it. And look, if their first big show is going to be Double or Nothing, then you know what? They should go all out to try to get, whether it's that one guy that would move the needle or a bunch of different people, throw a bunch of money at CM Punk, get him to come in, and if he does, the question is, who is it against? Well, if he signs a deal with AEW and New Japan, that man will be Kenny Omega. So that's what I'm predicting for 2019. A CM Punk AEW match against Kenny Omega. Now that being said, I predict that All Elite Wrestling will be unable to secure the kind of television deal they need to really make a mark, and instead they'll end up on a smaller station, or they'll end up streaming online, and pretty much just building around 2 to 3 big shows throughout the year, with that first Double or Nothing show probably not taking place until later in the spring. But all of these people, again, I said this earlier, predicting that AEW, they're predicting doom, and it's going to be a flop. Hey, look, you may be right. Anything's possible. But I don't understand the idea of taking glee in the idea that this thing might flop and fall flat on its face. Think of it like this. Another wrestling company sprouting up, as this one is, and flopping is a terrible thing for the wrestling business. Especially when you think about future companies. Forget AEW for a second. There's new companies popping up all the time. What does that say if this thing makes a big splash out of the gate and just fucking fails miserably? What does that say for future companies that sprout up looking for a good television deal when it comes to negotiating with these TV partners? You think they're going to look kindly on that? They're going to look at this and go, look, this thing's going to flop just like this AEW thing did. Remember those AEW guys we talked to? Look what happened to those guys. Why would we negotiate with somebody that doesn't even have as much money behind them? It has a ripple effect. It's a terrible thing for the wrestling business if this thing flops. And I don't believe it will. I don't believe that All Elite Wrestling will flop, as some are predicting, in 2019. I hope it does well. Because even if I wasn't a fan of it, and if I don't plan to watch, I would still root for it to succeed. I predict that this whole McMahon's taking over both shows storyline in WWE will end up putting Vince McMahon at odds with Triple H, with Shane McMahon supporting his dad, Stephanie supporting her husband, and I think we're already seeing the seeds planted with that, Vince McMahon AJ Styles segment from Smackdown a couple of weeks ago, and the segment with Triple H on Raw last Monday, firing up Seth Rollins. Here's the best way to make sense of these segments, and here's my prediction for how this all goes down. And how's this for doing something different? AJ Styles, who now is the number one contender again for the WWE Championship, I predict, will beat Daniel Bryan to win back the title at the Royal Rumble. In the meantime, Seth Rollins will win the men's Royal Rumble match. But instead of choosing to fight for the Universal title at WrestleMania, he challenges AJ Styles for the WWE Championship, and he wins. Triple H's man, in the end, wins. Especially if AJ really doesn't want to be champion right now. There were reports when he lost the belt to Bryan that AJ himself had pushed for them to take the title off of him because, he's getting tired. He's getting older. He's getting tired. He wants to spend more time with his family. He doesn't want to work as many shows. Let's assume all of that is true. There's nothing wrong with putting the belt back on AJ for 2 months, only to have him drop it to Seth Rollins at WrestleMania. It's perfectly logical. AJ gets a short run with the belt. Rollins wins the WWE Championship at WrestleMania. And with Rollins being now on the Smackdown roster, AJ Styles, after WrestleMania, he moves to Monday Night Raw. It's a lateral move in terms of talent. Now, with this being the new plan, I predict that Braun Strowman will beat Brock Lesnar at the Royal Rumble to finally capture the Universal Championship. Because if at first, second, third, fourth, and fifth, you don't succeed, well, why not try again? And once he wins, Seth Rollins now has less of a reason to want to challenge for the Universal title anyway, because he no longer has to worry about wrestling an absentee champion that he's been trashing on promos now for how many months. He's been ragging on Brock Lesnar. He's never around and this and that. And look, I'd love to see the match, and it certainly feels like they may be building to that match. But if Brock loses the championship first at the Rumble, well, that all goes out the window, and now anything can happen. So all of this is tied together. Brock has to lose the belt to Braun, I think, in order to facilitate all of these other things that I'm predicting here. And so I think Braun wins the title. Drew McIntyre, meanwhile, who's been pushed very hard on Monday Night Raw, he will then win the Raw Elimination Chamber match in February and go on to beat Braun Strowman at WrestleMania to win the Universal Championship. I predict that Becky Lynch, I know I'm really going out on a limb on this one, but I'm predicting that Becky Lynch will win the Women's Royal Rumble match and go on to challenge Ronda Rousey for the Raw Women's title at WrestleMania. They have already announced a triple threat match for Smackdown this Tuesday with Charlotte, Becky, and Carmella to determine who's going to challenge Asuka for the championship at the Royal Rumble. Carmella's already in the Royal Rumble. She earned the number 30 spot by winning the whole mixed match challenge thing. Becky should not be losing to Asuka and should absolutely be in the Royal Rumble. Now, I said she had to lose at TLC. I predicted that the way to go, you have her lose at TLC. It's a three-way. She's not in there by herself. It's not like a direct loss. That's perfectly fine. And then she can chase or go after Ronda. And that seems to be the direction they're going in. But then to put her in a championship match all of a sudden at the Rumble and then just have Asuka beat her, doesn't really make any sense. And unless they're going to unify the titles and they want to do champion against champion at WrestleMania, which I guess they could do, I don't see them unifying the belts, though. Then it doesn't make any sense to have her go in there and lose to Asuka or even beat Asuka. So I think, and by the way, she can do both. She can lose to Asuka, then come back and win the Rumble match. I just don't see the point in beating her earlier in the show. I think Charlotte will win that match on Tuesday. She'll go on to challenge Asuka at the Royal Rumble, and that will pave the way for Becky Lynch to enter the Women's Royal Rumble match, and then she can eliminate Nia Jax to win. I predicted John Cena will get his rematch with The Undertaker at WrestleMania 35 and will win this time. And I want to say that that's going to be it for The Undertaker, but I know better than that. So when it comes to predicting Undertaker's last match or not, I'm going to keep my mouth shut. Now watch, this will be the year that he actually does retire. But yes, John Cena will get his rematch. That really wasn't much of a match they had last year. For all the years of, man, that's the one big match they never really did with The Undertaker at WrestleMania. And then to basically have a glorified squash. Not that I really necessarily have a desire to see this match again, but I don't think they're done with that story between those two so quickly. I predict that Andrade Cien Almas will win the United States Championship from Rusev and will defend the title at WrestleMania against Rey Mysterio. I predict that WWE will bring back Hulk Hogan to host WrestleMania. His crown jewel appearance, even his appearance on Raw tomorrow night to honor Mean Gene Okerlund, these are all little trial runs for him. Don't be fooled. These are all little trial runs to see what the reaction is going to be. But I have little doubt in my mind he'll be at WrestleMania. And hosting the show again is the only role that makes sense, since he really can't do anything physical at this point. And so I think he will be that. Not only on Raw tomorrow night will he come out and be cheered, but he will be at WrestleMania. And all this talk about him being booed or booed out of the building, you may have pockets of it, but I think Hogan will be there, and I think Hogan will be cheered. I predict that with Vince McMahon's time being taken up more and more as the year goes on by the impending return of the XFL in 2020, Triple H finally takes the creative reins from his father-in-law for Smackdown Live when it moves to Fox in the fall. And in doing so, Shawn Michaels and Gabe Sapolsky will both gain more influence in NXT as a result of Triple H having to devote more of his time to the main roster. In the meantime, Raw will put on strong shows leading into WrestleMania. Don't be fooled. This show is going to go right back to the way it was before long, because there are not going to be any radical changes made to it. Some cosmetic moves, maybe some new faces, maybe some trades or things of that nature, but not much else will change. And before the end of the year, the lows will get even lower, like they have been doing every year the last few years. And I think by Christmas, we will see Raw bottoming out at about 1.5 million viewers for those holiday shows. Brock Lesnar. Even without the Universal Championship, I predict that Brock Lesnar will continue to hang around WWE for the duration of 2019. I don't think he's going anywhere. Whether he fights in UFC or not, when this year is over, he will still be with WWE. Because, look, it is too much money for him to pass up for the schedule he has. He is doing the minimum number of dates that he needs to do and making a ridiculous amount of money, probably more than anybody else in the company. Why would he give that up? He's only getting older. Why would he give that up? Why would you give that up? If you were in his shoes, would you give that up? But I predict that he will be drafted to Smackdown just in time to make the big move over to Fox. And for the first time since 2004, Brock Lesnar will wrestle a match on Smackdown Live. Probably the premiere episode on Fox, because you know they're going to want to load that thing up. And to that same end, I also predict that Ronda Rousey will be drafted over to SmackDown Live before the move to Fox. There were already reports a few months ago that Fox executives wanted her on the show. They want that show to have more of a sports feel to it than Raw has. So I predict that Ronda goes to SmackDown. I predict that The Rock will headline the WWE Hall of Fame class of 2019. I have not looked at his movie schedule, so I could be very wrong about this. Because if he is busy filming movies, he ain't going to be at the Hall of Fame. But they need a big name. And you can get a Batista. There's still some people left that have big names, but Batista ain't as big as The Rock. There is no bigger name than Dwayne Johnson to put into the WWE Hall of Fame at this point. I was going to say maybe Undertaker would be as big, but no, actually he would not be. To wrestling fans, maybe. But just to people in general, the bigger name, no. Undertaker is not nearly as big as The Rock. Especially publicity-wise. I mean, come on. There's no bigger name they can induct than The Rock. And I also predict going into the Hall of Fame this year, finally, will be Chyna. I believe Chyna will be posthumously inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. Matt Riddle, I predict, will make his main roster WWE debut on Monday Night Raw the night after WrestleMania to begin his quest to be the man to retire Brock Lesnar. He will not be successful, but he'll try. He'll talk about it, he'll try, but he will not succeed. That being said, there was a guy on Twitter, I have to mention this guy. Manju, he calls himself. He called me out for saying that Matt Riddle would end up being a bigger star. I didn't say how long it would take. I just said that in the end, Matt Riddle will become a bigger star than either Lars Sullivan or EC3. I assume he's referring when I was talking about all the call-ups, the NXT call-ups, and how there's really nobody in that class that's coming up in the next few weeks that stands out to me as being kind of the next big breakout WWE star. I don't think it's anybody in that class of 6 that's being called up. EC3, Nikki Cross, Lacey Evans, Lars Sullivan, Heavy Machinery. I don't think it's anybody in that class. I think you're really talking more about an Aleister Black or a Matt Riddle. And so I assume that he's calling me out for making those comments. And he says that when he first looked at Matt, he called it one of the biggest jokes he's ever heard that I said that. And he said when he first looked at Matt Riddle, he thought, who is this jobber guy? That was his first thought. And as I said to him, and I'll say it here in the prediction show, bookmark that tweet and let's come back to it in the future. And we'll see if you still find it funny. Okay? How's that sound, Manju? Does that sound okay to you? By the way, that's J-U. He spells it, not J-E-W. For those of you who may be wondering, that's not how he spells it. I predict that Adam Cole will win the men's Money in the Bank ladder match, and that Shayna Baszler, if WWE does not do a Queen of the Ring tournament, which had been talked about a few months ago, she is my pick then to win the women's Money in the Bank ladder match. And finally, I also think that we will see that horsewomen versus horsewomen match that's been talked about for so long now. Charlotte, Becky, Sasha, and Bayley taking on Ronda, Shayna, Marina, and Jessamine Duke. I believe we will see it, and I believe it will take place at the Survivor Series. And so those are my predictions for 2019. Chime in. Let me know. What do you think? What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? What are some of your own bold predictions for 2019? Let me hear it. I want to hear what you guys think.